There comes a moment when you simply stop chasing closure, you stop explaining your heart to people who were never listening, you stop trying to prove your worth to those who were never meant to see it. Have you ever been there, that quiet moment, when the chaos outside finally pushes you inward? You've explained yourself enough, you've apologized for simply feeling too deeply, you've exhausted every word, hoping it would somehow fix what's already been shattered. But here's the truth no one likes to admit: the more you explain, the more power you give away, the more you chase, the smaller you become in their eyes. It feels like courage, doesn't it, to fight for understanding, to keep the door open, to say, "Please, just hear me out." But often, that need to be understood isn't bravery, it's fear, fear dressed up as hope. And the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they knew something our world seems to have forgotten. True strength doesn't always speak, it doesn't shout, it doesn't explain itself to people already committed to misunderstanding you. It chooses silence, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of self-respect. The silence that says, "I no longer argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding me." You see, the more you obsess over what you can't control, the more you surrender the one thing that truly matters, yourself. And when someone disrespects you, twists your words, tries to provoke a reaction, the strongest move is to not react at all, not out of bitterness, not as a tactic, but because dignity doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it simply leaves. And that silence, it speaks volumes. It's not empty, it's not cold. It's full of discipline, restraint, and unshakable self-worth. In this video, we're going to explore a different kind of silence, not the silence of weakness, but a Stoic superpower, the kind that makes people sit with their own thoughts, the kind that exposes truth, tests loyalty, and reclaims control, the kind of silence that becomes the loudest message you'll ever send. These are 6 timeless Stoic truths: why the strongest people don't argue, don't chase, and never explain themselves to those who chose not to understand. Let's begin. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in that moment when every part of you was screaming to speak, to defend yourself, to lash out, to say something, anything, just to feel like you weren't powerless? Your heart is pounding, your thoughts are spiraling, and your pride, bruised, bleeding, wants to stand up and scream, "You don't get to treat me like this." But that moment, that exact moment, is where the real test begins. The Stoics knew this well. They believed the strongest response is often no response at all, not because they didn't feel, but because they refused to let temporary emotion dictate permanent action. Reacting is easy, anyone can lash out, anyone can type out a paragraph in anger and hit send. That's not power, that's impulse. But silence is a form of emotional mastery. To sit in your stillness, when everything in you is begging for noise, that's not weakness, that's discipline. It's the highest form of control. Because true strength isn't about winning the fight, it's about choosing not to fight, when peace is more valuable than being right. I remember a friend who was betrayed by someone he trusted deeply. He had every reason to blow up, to expose the lies, to seek revenge. But he didn't. He walked away quietly. No post, no rant, no justification. People thought he was passive, but I watched him heal in silence, faster than anyone expected. Why? Because he didn't feed the fire, he chose to starve the drama. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what silence gives you. Space between the trigger and the reaction, and in that space, you choose wisdom over impulse, self-respect over validation, purpose over pettiness. let me ask you this: how many of your regrets came from what you said too quickly? How many relationships fractured from words you couldn't take back? Now think, how often did silence save you from a mess you didn't need to be in? Here's the truth: you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to pick up every sword handed to you, because sometimes the loudest message isn't what you say, it's what you don't say. And silence, when it comes from strength, is louder than any scream. Have you ever noticed how loud the world becomes when you're hurting? Everyone suddenly becomes an expert, everyone has advice, everyone has something to say about your pain, and you find yourself scrambling, trying to explain, trying to justify, trying to be understood by people who were never truly listening in the first place. You scroll through old messages. You replay every word. You search for signs, for answers. Why did they leave? What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? But here's the hard truth: the Stoics knew it well. You don't fix your pain by chasing answers out there, you fix it by sitting quietly with it, because in silence, something shifts, the noise fades, the outside world quiets down, and for the first time, you hear your own voice, a voice that's not begging, not blaming, just being honest. It says, they never truly respected you. You weren't angry because they left, you were angry because you stayed too long. You don't need an apology, you need peace. Marcus Aurelius once said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this, you have the power to revoke at any moment. That's the power of silence. It doesn't numb you. It reveals you. It separates emotion from identity, because pain screams, go back. Make them understand. Prove your worth. But silence whispers, let them go. Protect your peace. Know your value. And that's the shift, that's the moment healing begins, not in the conversation you never got, not in the paragraph you never sent, but in the stillness, where you finally see the truth. Modern culture tells us, speak your truth. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is sit in silence and listen to it, because if someone truly values you, they don't need a speech to recognize your worth, and if they don't, no amount of words will ever change that. So give yourself permission to be quiet, to not respond, to not chase closure in chaos, because in that silence, you don't just find peace, you find yourself. Let's be honest, most of us have been taught to believe that closure is the only path to peace, that if we could just have one more conversation, just one honest explanation, we'd finally feel free. But let me tell you something hard to hear: you don't need closure, you don't need a final word, you don't even need them to understand what they did. What you truly need is clarity, clarity that doesn't come from their words, but from your decision to stop waiting for something they were never willing to give. You see, begging for closure is like reopening a wound and expecting it to heal faster. You reach out, hoping for peace, but all they offer is silence, deflection, or worse, more confusion, and every time you ask, you hand them the remote control to your healing. That's not healing, that's self-betrayal. It's like saying, I'll move on, but only if you allow me to. But why should your freedom depend on the person who broke your peace in the first place? The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That means, don't chase understanding. Don't beg to be heard, live your truth, let your silence speak louder than any wound. Think about it, when someone chooses to hurt you, ignore you, or twist your words, they've already told you everything you need to know. You don't need them to spell it out, you just need to believe what their actions already revealed. So here's a better kind of closure: your decision to stop writing unsent messages, to stop checking if they've changed, to stop hoping the next time will be different. Your decision to close the door, not with rage, not with revenge, but with calm, quiet self-respect, because peace doesn't come from what they say. It comes from what you no longer need to hear. If they wanted to fix it, they would have. If they respected your worth, you wouldn't have to ask for it. So the question isn't, why did they leave? It's, why am I still holding on to someone who let go first? Let this be your closure: no more chasing, no more explaining, no more waiting for permission. To move forward, you are free the moment you decide you are, and that decision starts now. There comes a moment in your life when silence becomes your shield, not out of weakness, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized your peace is priceless. You stop arguing. You stop explaining your soul to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop replying to every jab, every guilt trip, every subtle manipulation, dressed as concern, and in that silence, you reclaim something sacred: yourself. The Stoics understood this. They taught that peace is not found in controlling others, but in mastering your own response. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. These things aren't asking to be judged by you. Leave them alone." In other words, not everything deserves your energy. See, silence isn't retreat. It's not avoidance. It's a boundary, a quiet wall that separates your inner calm from the storms someone else keeps dragging with them. And when you stop reacting, when you no longer play the game, you break the cycle. They push buttons. They wait for your reaction. They want a show. But what happens when you give them nothing? No fight, no final message, no proof that they still have access to your emotions. The drama collapses, the fire dies, because it's not being fed anymore. And that's the beauty of Stoic silence. It's not passive, it's intentional. It's the art of walking away, not to punish them, but to preserve you. You don't curse, you don't explain, you don't slam the door, you just leave, with dignity, with clarity, with your soul intact. Ask yourself, how many times have you stayed in conversations you already outgrew? How many times did your silence say what words never could? You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to answer every accusation. You don't have to carry their chaos, just to prove you care. Because real strength, it isn't loud, it doesn't need to yell, or beg, or convince. It simply removes itself from what no longer aligns with its worth. So the next time someone tries to bait you, to provoke a reaction, pause, breathe, and remember, you don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe them your energy. Sometimes, the loudest declaration of self-respect is saying nothing at all. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. That's power, that is Stoic strength. There's a strange paradox in human connection. The more you talk, the less they listen. The more you chase, the further they run. But when you go quiet, really quiet, they start to feel it. Not your words, not your anger, but your absence. And that silence, it says everything you were trying to explain, only louder. You see, we're taught that communication is the key, that if you just say the right thing, in the right tone, at the right time, you'll finally be understood. But what if the person on the other end never planned to understand you in the first place? That's when silence becomes your protection. It's not passive. It's not cold. It's not about punishment. It's about preserving your energy. Because silence isn't emptiness. It's a boundary. It's your way of saying, I've said enough, I've tried enough. And now, I choose myself. Albert Hubbard once said, "He who does not understand your silence will probably not understand your words. And that's the hard truth, because those who truly care about you, they feel the shift, they notice when your voice is no longer in the room, they sense the withdrawal, long before you say goodbye. But those who only valued their power over you, they panic when the performance ends. They were never listening to understand, only to control. So when you go quiet, you interrupt the cycle, you remove the fuel from their fire, and you reclaim your peace. Ask yourself this: how many times have you explained, defended, justified, only to be met with silence, gaslighting, or worse, blame? How often did your words fall on deaf ears, because they never valued your voice to begin with? Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop participating in your own mistreatment, and that's what silence is. It's not a game, it's not revenge, it's a return to self-respect. When you stop responding, you stop bleeding energy into a black hole. When you stop chasing closure, you begin to close the door yourself. When you stop needing to be heard, you finally start listening to your own peace. So no, silence isn't weakness, it's clarity, it's discipline, it's strength, and sometimes, it's the only language they were never prepared to hear. Let it echo, let it say what your words no longer need to. Let me ask you something: have you ever just gone quiet, not out of defeat, not out of apathy, but because you were done handing over your peace to people who only listen to argue? Inhale. There's a strange paradox in human connection. The more you talk, the less they listen. The more you chase, the faster they run. But the moment you go quiet, they start to notice, because silence isn't empty, it's powerful. It doesn't beg, it doesn't justify, it doesn't explain, it simply removes itself and lets the absence speak. Elbert Hubbard once said, "He who does not understand your silence will probably not understand your words." And that truth hits hard when you've spent so much of your life explaining yourself to people who were never really listening. Have you ever noticed, when you stop defending yourself, people reveal exactly who they are? Some grow uncomfortable, some get angry, some disappear, not because you've done something wrong, but because they've lost control over how you respond. See, silence unmasks people. Those who truly respect you, they'll feel your absence. They'll remember your presence without needing reminders. Those who used you, they'll vanish because the supply ran dry, and those who try to manipulate you, they'll get louder, more reactive, because without your reaction, their control shatters. And here's the uncomfortable truth: some people were only kind when you were easy to manage, when you stayed quiet, but submissive, when you gave, explained, tolerated, without limits. But the moment you stop performing, the masks come off. That's why silence is not retreat. It's not weakness, it's not emotional avoidance, it's a spotlight. It shines on who they really are, when you're no longer feeding their illusion. The Stoics understood this. They didn't argue. They didn't defend their character with noise. They observed, they listened, and they let action speak where words had failed. So if you're unsure about someone's intentions, pull your energy back, close your mouth, and wait. Don't chase clarity in chaos. Don't explain your value to those who profit from your confusion, because in that quiet space, you'll see everything, not through their excuses, but through their behavior. And in the end, the silence you choose may be the only voice that tells you the truth. Silence isn't just about healing, it's about revealing. It shows you, without a single word, who's real and who is just passing through. Because when the noise fades, when you stop explaining, stop proving, stop chasing, only the truth remains. People who genuinely care don't need you to beg, they don't need dramatic speeches or constant reassurance. They feel your silence, and still choose to stay, that's how you know, in the quiet, something sacred happens. The masks fall, the games stop, and what you're left with is clarity. Who reaches out when you go still, who listens, even when you're not speaking, who doesn't need you to perform, to keep their love alive. The Stoics never asked for promises, they didn't trust pretty words, they observed, quietly, patiently. Because actions always reveal more than intentions ever could, silence becomes the test, not a punishment, not manipulation, but a boundary, a way of saying, this is who I am, without effort, without performance, without bending. If you can meet me here, in this stillness, you're welcome to stay, and if they walk away, let them. Silence filters your life. The ones who stay through your silence, those are the ones who see your soul, not just your service. You don't have to prove your worth to be loved. The right people recognize it, without you ever having to speak it out loud. So the next time you feel the urge to explain, to defend, to keep someone around with words, pause, be still, let silence do the work. You'll be amazed at what it reveals, and who it reveals, because in the end, silence isn't just peace, it's a mirror, and in that reflection, you finally see who's willing to love you for who you are, not for what you offer. There's something deeply uncomfortable about being misunderstood. You want to fix it, you want to defend yourself, you want to say, that's not who I am. But here's the truth that most people run from: explaining yourself to someone who's already made up their mind not to understand you is not courage, it's fear, dressed up as dignity. It feels like strength, but it's really just self-preservation, trying to win back control from people who were never safe to begin with. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Do not waste the rest of your life worrying about what other people think of you." And that wasn't just a quote, it was armor, a decision, a way of walking in peace through a world full of noise. Because real confidence is quiet, it doesn't need validation, it doesn't chase misunderstanding just to feel seen. Why? Because someone who truly knows who they are doesn't need to prove it. When you remain silent in the face of judgment, you're not hiding, you're standing in the truth. Think about it. Have you ever noticed that the loudest people, the ones begging to be understood, are often the ones least at peace with themselves, but the quiet ones, the calm, steady, unshaken ones, they know, if you were meant to understand me, you would have felt me before I even spoke. Your silence becomes your boundary. It says, I'm not here to audition for your approval. I'm not lowering my worth just to be heard. I'm not explaining what my peace already knows. And here's the paradox: the quieter you become, the more powerful your presence feels, because in that silence, people begin to wonder, why isn't he fighting back? Why isn't she defending herself? Did I lose them for good? And the answer is simple: you no longer need to be understood to feel whole. That's not arrogance, that's clarity, that's Stoic strength. So the next time you feel that urge to explain yourself, to be heard, to fix someone's false image of you, pause, breathe, and remember, you're not silent because you're weak, you're silent because you've chosen peace over performance. If they care, they'll ask. If they value you, they'll listen. Without force. But if they don't, then let your silence be the answer they never expected, and the closure they'll never receive, because your silence says everything. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from someone, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but simply because your peace mattered more than their attention? There's something hauntingly powerful about that. When you stop responding, stop defending, stop needing to be understood, the whole dynamic changes. You don't need to slam the door. You don't need to shout, "I'm done." You don't even need to leave a final message. You just leave, quietly, cleanly, with your dignity intact. And in that silence, something begins to happen. They notice, not because you screamed, but because the space you leave behind echoes louder than anything you could have said. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And he was right. We imagine that if we explain ourselves just one more time, they'll finally understand. We think closure is something they can give us. But here's the truth most people never say out loud. People don't learn through explanations, they learn through absence. They don't hear your words, they feel your silence. When you stop reacting, they're left with only themselves, their patterns, their choices, their guilt, echoing in the emptiness. And that silence, it doesn't feed the drama, it ends it. You see, when you walk away in silence, you deny them the comfort of a story. No blame, no conflict, just consequences. And that, ironically, is what makes it hurt the most. Not because you were cruel, but because you stopped participating in the game. Your stillness becomes a mirror, and they finally see who they are, without your energy keeping them afloat. So ask yourself, what are you still trying to fix with words that only your silence can solve? What are you holding on to? A last conversation, a text, a sense of being understood by someone who never tried to understand you. You don't need any of that to move forward. You don't need their validation to feel complete. You don't need their apology to find peace. You just need to choose yourself, quietly, consistently, and without apology. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you'll ever do is walk away, without anger, without explanation, and without looking back. If you've made it this far, then something inside you has already shifted. That quiet discomfort you've been carrying, it's not weakness, it's awareness, a subtle, but powerful realization that you're done begging for clarity, done shrinking yourself for people who only saw your silence as a pause, not a boundary, done proving your worth to those who were never ready to recognize it. You don't need to be louder to matter. You don't need to explain yourself to feel seen. You don't need to break your own peace just to make someone else comfortable. What you need is clarity, and clarity doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up when you choose to walk away, not in rage, not in bitterness, but with dignity so strong, it speaks louder than any goodbye ever could. This is not coldness. This is not giving up on love. This is the moment you stop chasing chaos and start choosing yourself. The Stoics never said silence was weakness. They called it discipline. They taught that real power is the ability to choose what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's what silence gives you. Power, not over others, but over yourself, your reactions, your peace, your story. There will always be moments that tempt you, moments when pride wants to shout, when your pain wants to be heard. But if you can pause, breathe, and choose stillness, you win something far greater than an argument. You win your freedom, because every time you walk away without drama, you reclaim your self-respect. Every time you don't explain yourself to someone who already chose not to understand you, you protect your spirit. And every time you choose silence over reaction, you reinforce the quiet truth of who you really are. So no, you may not get the closure, you may never hear the apology, but you will gain something more permanent, yourself. Let your silence be your final word, not out of ego, not out of anger, but because you've finally learned, your peace is not up for negotiation, and your worth was never meant to be proven. So when they wonder why you stopped explaining, why you stopped fighting, why you walked away without looking back, let the silence answer for you, and let that answer echo forever.